Verse 9, reading to the end of the chapter. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everybody. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, "It is mine to avenge." It is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now we'll look to Luke. Thank you, Luke. Look forward to what you've got to share.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Well, it's a pleasure to be back here today to have the opportunity to once again share with you. As mentioned already in this service, what a great week it's been as we've commemorated Anzac Day. And of course this year marks the 100-year end of the First World War. It's a special week, and it's certainly a special week for myself as a serving member. It's been a terrific week, a draining week, a tiring week. I think I've had about 6 different services that I've attended this week, and I've taken about 4 of them. So it's been a tiring week, but it's been a great week to see people share in the national spirit that Anzac Day conjures up, I think, in all Australians. And in keeping with that, today I want to speak about a topic that I hope will be dear to all of us. It's a topic of love and sacrifice. And these are the passages that I'll be referring to. I want to start by saying that Anzac Day is a special day in our national calendar. It's not only a national holiday or a specific celebration of any historical event in particular, of any person or location. It's a day rather where we set aside to honour and remember the members of the armed forces who have served our nation so well. We honour them because their service has granted us the many rights and privileges that we enjoy each and every day. They serve in dangerous war zones far away from home. They serve on the streets of developing countries, maintaining the peace. They serve on flight lines, keeping the skies free of danger. They serve on ships deployed for months at a time. They serve in our nation as a force to preserve the peace and acting as a deterrent against those that would seek other than that. In short, they serve where they are needed most, sometimes far away from friends and family, in uncomfortable surroundings. All of them volunteers to protect freedoms of this country. Today, I want to honour the soldiers, sailors and airmen and women who have served today and in past years. As part of honouring our servicemen and women today, today's message is built around the Romans 12 passage that you just heard a moment ago. In this passage, Paul is writing to the church in Rome, extolling the virtues of Christian values. Among those values, you'll notice is love and sacrifice, and they are paramount for Christian conduct. This morning I want us to take a closer look at these 2 concepts to show how both Christians and the military live out both. start with a story that outlines what sacrifice is really all about. It comes from a book written by Ernest Gordon. Has anybody heard of him? He's the author of the autobiography called Miracle on the River Kwai. Has anyone heard of that? And he describes the events based on the World War II and on the building of the bridge in the jungles of Burma. Now, in the story, the Scottish soldiers were forced by their Japanese captors to labour on the creation of a railway through inhospitable surroundings. The work conditions degenerated to barbarous behaviour. Barbaric. And one afternoon, something happened. A shovel was missing. The Japanese officer in charge became enraged. He demanded that the missing shovel be produced or else. When nobody in the squadron budged, the officer got his gun and threatened to kill all of them on the spot. It was obvious that the officer meant what he said. Then finally one man stepped forward. The officer put away his gun, picked up the shovel and beat the man. See, one man had claimed the responsibility for the missing tool and had paid the ultimate sacrifice. He was beaten to death with the shovel. He paid the ultimate sacrifice of his own life. When it was over, the survivors picked up the body and carried it with them to the second tool check. This time no shovel was missing. Indeed, there had been a miscount at the first checkpoint. Word spread like wildfire through the whole camp. An innocent man had been willing to die to save the others. The incident, recurs Ernest Gordon, the incident had a profound effect on the others, recalls Ernest Gordon. The men began to treat each other like brothers. When the victorious Allies swept in, the survivors' human skeletons lined up in front of their captors. But instead of attacking their captors, they protected them and insisted no more hatred, no more killing. Now what we need is forgiveness. So the sacrifice of this one man changed the hearts of those around him. He knew that he was innocent, yet he chose to take the blame just the same. He faced the punishment to save the others. He showed his love for his fellow soldiers through his own sacrifice. With this action, he placed the needs of his brothers in arms over his own. Similarly, when the Allies liberated the camp, the Scottish soldiers defended their captors. Again, we see the action of love instead of revenge. We see a Christian attitude of love where others might have chosen to attack the Japanese guards. God willing, we will never be faced with this situation as grim as this one. But we can still impact those around us by our actions. The values of love and sacrifice can have a unique effect on everyone around you. There's a Christian song that goes, we are Christians by our love. And now I want to tell you our next story is of Major Sullivan Beaulieu. Has anyone heard that name? No? Well, let me explain another story of how our military members and their families give so much to us. Both servicemen and women that deploy and the families left behind sacrifice much of their lives and their lifestyle for the defence of our nation, both currently and in past generations. So our men and women of the armed forces often endure hardships that most of society can hardly imagine. Our service members have to leave their families behind as they move forward to dangerous areas. Often the service members and their families are separated for months at a time. Sometimes the families endure the loss of loved ones. Such was the case of Major Sullivan Beaulieu and his wife Sarah. See, Major Beaulieu was an army soldier of the Union who fought during the Civil War. He wrote to his wife about 1 week before he was killed at the First Battle of Bull Run. He wrote a lengthy letter, a love letter, but the letter was not delivered until after his death. In part, his letter reads like this. I have no misgivings or lack of confidence in the cause in which I am engaged, and my courage does not falter. I know how American civilization leans upon the triumph of the government. I know how great a debt we owe to those who went before us through the suffering of the revolution. And I am willing, perfectly willing, to lay down the joys of this life to help maintain this government and to help pay that debt. Sarah, my love for you is deathless, and yet my love of country comes over me like a strong wind that bears me irresistibly, with all those chains to the battlefield. The memory of all those blissful moments I've enjoyed with you come crowding over me, and I feel most grateful to God and you that I have enjoyed them for so long, and how hard it is for me to give them up and burn to ashes the future years when, God willing, we might have loved and lived together and watched our boys grow up around us to honourable manhood. If I do not return, my dear Sarah, never forget how much I loved you, nor that when my last breath escapes me on the battlefield, it will whimper your name. Major Sullivan was killed a week later on July 21st, 1861. The letter, found among his personal effects, was never mailed. His wife received the love letter a few weeks after his demise. Major Sullivan, his wife and their sons bore the brunt of war on their shoulders, and they were left to deal with the heartache of battle and the loss of a husband and father. And they had to discover a new way to move forward without a part of their family. And unfortunately, this is the same sacrifice paid by many military families throughout history. Each of these cases of love and sacrifice are tragic to those left behind. Each has a story to tell of how one paid the price for others. Each focused on the love of others rather than the love of self. In this world, selfish desires are a big part of the community around us, aren't they? The world has too many focused on getting more out of life and failing to pay back to society. Often our world is cold and calculating rather than showing love and sacrifice. Sometimes we're a reflection of that world around us, and we fail to pay attention to the needs of others. Sometimes we fail to love where we should. Sometimes we fail to love as long as we should. Sometimes we fail to forgive and forget. In our church community, we should be the first to love, the first to forgive, and the first to sacrifice on behalf of others. You see, the church can be an amazing place when it's working as it's supposed to. When we're treating one another as if each person were Christ himself. When we're following the command that Jesus left us. In the book of Mark it tells us, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. It's from Mark 12 verse 30 to 31. See, love should not be a foreign concept to us. Through the caring for one another, we spread the love of Christ and create a nurturing climate. Our actions often speak louder than words. Whether we realise it or not, the world is paying attention. As Christians, we should express love at every opportunity by caring for one another, listening to what people actually have to say, and by taking the time out of our busy lives to try and make a difference. You see, the life that we lead here on earth is temporary. is a temporary existence when compared to the eternal salvation of heaven. God loved us so much that he gave his only begotten Son to die for us. He showed his love for us by sending his Son to atone for our sins. During his life on earth, Jesus was the example of love. He showed compassion and mercy for those who needed it, and offered forgiveness to the repentant. He also explained the standard of love that we are to share with others. We may not always be able to follow his commands to love others as we'd like to be loved, but we should make every attempt to treat even total strangers with the spirit of love and compassion in everything we do. See, God didn't ignore us when we stumbled in sin. Rather, he offered his hand to help us back to our feet. Now, just as the man in the shovel story sacrificed himself for his comrades in arms, we should also be willing to lend a hand when a stranger needs assistance. Major Sullivan chose to serve his nation for the betterment of those around him. We may not be asked to make such drastic sacrifices, but we can still love people in need. God's love doesn't end at the church door. It extends to the whole world. In the same way, our love should not stop at our families, but stretch to all people. See, in a small Middle Eastern country, nearly 2,000 years ago, another servant expressed love for those around him. A closer look at this hero reveals some strong similarities to the heroes I just described, but also some significant differences. See, his name was Jesus, raised as the son of Joseph the carpenter, just like the soldier who sacrificed himself for the lack of a shovel. Jesus willingly endured pain and suffering on behalf of his people to the point of death. In fact, the sinners, not yet his people. Just like Major Sullivan Bellevue, he knew what was coming his way as well. See, the men and women of the military put their lives in danger for the sake of their country and their brothers in arms against other human beings. The battle Christ waged was against something far more powerful and devastating. The ultimate victory was not simply the taking of some important hilltop or body of water, or even another country, but one which secured our very souls, the victory over the power of the devil and sin in our lives, and ultimately victory over death itself. In that victory, the sacrifice made by Jesus Christ inspired those who witnessed it or heard about it. In his first letter, Peter, one of Jesus' lieutenants, encouraged his readers with the lessons he learned from his commanding officer. From 1 Peter 3:15 we read, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." And the clearest, most dynamic example of how Christ's life and death and resurrection inspired his people is the fact that we are gathered here today to sing hymns, to hear God's word being proclaimed, and to offer up prayers and praises and petitions, and to encourage one another in our faith. Before I close, let me say this. As we go forth today, let me encourage you to remember those who have served and have made the sacrifice for the freedoms that we enjoy today. At the same time, give thanks to God also for Jesus Christ and his willingness to serve, his commitment to our spiritual freedom and our eternal salvation. And then be confident in your daily faith battles, knowing that you are equipped by God to be that faithful warrior that makes a difference in the world around you. You see, the need for a military force will more than likely never disappear, certainly not in our lifetime. We will need a protection from the forces around the globe to guarantee the rights and privileges that we enjoy today. It's through our soldiers, sailors and airmen and women that we have the luxury of freedom, peace and liberty. But only Christ can grant the freedom from sin that his sacrifice has granted us. At the close of World War II, a famous quote was, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." When we think about Jesus Christ as he hung on a cross, we must declare never in the history of a sinful world has all of humanity owed everything to only one Saviour. John 3:15 says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." This verse speaks how our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ made the willing and deliberate sacrifice of going to a horrific death on a cross, giving himself freely so that others, you and me included, could have the victory over sin and death. It's my hope and prayer for all of us that we would be reminded that service and sacrifice made by the members of our armed forces is an ideal that comes from our Lord and Saviour, to serve and sacrifice for the benefit of others. Be reminded today that the example of Christ's sacrifice is a legacy that we too are called to carry on with, as the ambassadors of his love to the world around us. Let me simply finish by saying, and posing to you a question. Ask yourself, are you ready to serve and sacrifice to show the love of Christ to others? God bless.
Thank you. It's been a very encouraging message. Thank you.